Hello, and welcome to your YouTube channel, Learn English Lab. Today's podcast topic name is Business Meetings in English, Advanced English Listening Practice Podcast. And today, we are venturing into a completely hidden, really high-stakes world.
We really are. It's kind of an invisible battlefield.
Spot on. It's a world that you, sitting there listening to this right now, likely navigate every single day, maybe without even realizing the invisible forces at play. I mean, we are talking about the intensely complex realm of professional communication.
Right, which is just a minefield for so many people.
It undeniably is. So our mission for this deep dive is to bridge a very specific, incredibly frustrating gap. It's that gap between simply understanding the English language and actually, performing in English under the immense real-time pressure of fast-moving, high-level business meetings.
And that is a critical distinction to make right out of the gate. Understanding the language is, well, it's merely the entry ticket, right?
It gets you in the door.
Exact. I mean, spot on. Performing in it, especially under pressure, is an entirely different sport. It's a gap that catches incredibly talented, highly educated professionals completely off guard.
Yeah, to really set the scene for you, I want you to just picture this visceral scenario. You are sitting in a sleek, glass-walled boardroom.
Oh, we've all been there.
Right, or maybe you're at a London office, or perhaps you're staring at a grid of faces on a Zoom call with your remote team based out of Chicago, and the air in the room just feels thick.
The tension is palpable.
It is. The conversation is absolutely flying. I mean, ideas are bouncing across the table like a ping pong match being played at double speed. And the cognitive load on you is just immense.
Because you aren't just listening.
No, not at all. You are translating, you're analyzing, and you're formulating your own response simultaneously. And right in the middle of this chaos, a genuinely brilliant value-adding insight forms in your mind.
You've got the golden ticket.
You do. Undeniably what you want to say, it's highly relevant. It could literally solve the bottleneck the team has been arguing about for 20 minutes.
And the adrenaline just spikes right there, doesn't it? You have the answer.
Yes. So you take a breath, you open your mouth, you wait for that perfect little pause to speak, The polite gap in conversation you were taught always happens.
The one the textbooks promise you.
Right, the textbook pause. And then in a flash, you watch the moment completely evaporate because someone else jumped in a fraction of a millisecond before you.
And just like that, the meeting steamrolls ahead.
The topic shifts completely, and your brilliant idea is just left unspoken, trapped in your head, while the team moves on to a, frankly, way less effective solution.
It is a universally agonizing experience. I mean, if you ever felt that sting, the heat rising in your cheeks as the moment just passes you by, we're going to validate that frustration right now.
It's so frustrating.
It really is. But here's the thing. This is not a grammar issue you're facing. It's not a vocabulary deficit. You are dealing with an invisible layer of social choreography.
Social choreography. I love that term.
Yeah. And by the end of our discussion today, you are going to be equipped with a concrete, actionable toolkit. We'll explore how to interrupt politely, how to, hold the floor when someone attempts to talk over you.
Which happens constantly.
Constantly. And we'll cover how to command authority without ever causing offense or alienating your colleagues.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I think the first thing we need to do is completely demolish the myth that grammatical fluency equals meeting mastery.
Oh, absolutely. They are not the same thing.
They aren't. The way we learn English from a textbook completely ignores the incredibly fast, millisecond-level negotiations that happen in real-time professional conversations. I mean, the textbook assumes a polite exchange of information.
Right. Hello, how are you? I am fine, thank you.
Right, but reality is a literal fight for airtime.
It undeniably is. We really need to look closely at a linguistic concept called turn-taking. When you watch native speakers interact in a fast-paced corporate environment, they are instinctively managing who speaks, when they speak, and for how long.
It's like a dance.
It is. And they are absolutely not waiting for polite, distinct breaks in the conversation. Instead, they're using incredibly subtle vocal signals.
Like what, specifically?
Well, they're utilizing microshifts in intonation, strategic pauses, and even just the intake of breath to claim their space in the discussion.
It is almost biological, isn't it? Like you can hear someone inhale sharply, and the whole room subconsciously registers, oh, they're about to speak.
Yeah, it's entirely physiological and subconscious. And the rather uncomfortable reality of corporate life, the unspoken rule that dictates promotions and leadership roles is that the person who navigates this conversational rhythm most smoothly is almost always perceived as the most competent person in the room.
Regardless of their actual skills.
Yes. This happens regardless of their actual technical expertise. I mean, you could be the smartest person on the Zoom call, but if you cannot master the turn-taking rhythm, your competence is essentially invisible.
Wow. Your perceived competence is literally tied to your conversational timing. That is a terrifying reality for anyone who isn't a native speaker or, doesn't come from an aggressive conversational culture.
It's a huge hurdle.
It really reminds me of the story of Priya. We have this case study of a brilliantly talented software architect. Priya relocated from Bangalore to a major tech firm in San Francisco.
That's a massive cultural jump.
Huge. And her written documentation was completely flawless. We're talking about lucid, incredibly complex system architecture reports. I mean, everyone praised her sharp emails and her coding ability.
So on paper, she was a superstar.
Undeniably a superstar. But when she stepped into the weekly sprint planning meetings, the dynamic shifted entirely.
Well, the environment in those San Francisco tech meetings is notoriously aggressive. It's a flat hierarchy where ideas are expected to be thrown into the middle of the table and vigorously debated.
Right, it's a free-for-all. And Priya was consistently sidelined in these environments. She came from a cultural and linguistic background where interrupting a senior colleague was a sign of deep disrespect.
Which is very common in many parts of the world.
It is. So she would sit there, actively engaged, waiting for those natural pauses that her language textbooks implied would eventually appear. She kept waiting for the project manager to say, "Priya, what are your thoughts?"
But those pauses never arrived.
They never arrived. The conversation was a continuous, overlapping stream. Because she remained silent, a very dangerous narrative started to form around her.
People started making assumptions.
Exactly. Spot on. Her colleagues began to falsely assume she lacked original thinking. They assumed she wasn't fully engaged, or worse, that she didn't actually understand the complexity of the project.
What's fascinating here is that Priya's silence was not merely a matter of missed airtime. It was actively damaging her professional reputation day by day.
It was a career block.
Undeniably. Her inability to decode and participate in the turn-taking rhythm was directly impacting her career trajectory. It limited her visibility within the company and eroded her overall influence. She was essentially a ghost in the boardroom, despite being one of the most technically gifted people on the engineering team.
It's heartbreaking. I like to think about it this way. Standard English learning, the kind you do in a classroom or through an app, is a lot like mastering the rules of chess in a perfectly quiet, brightly lit room.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. You know how the knight moves, you know the strategies, you have all the time in the world to stare at the board, calculate your opponent's next 5 moves, and plan your attack. You feel entirely in control.
The variables are contained. It's safe.
But a real business meeting, that is like playing speed chess in a bustling, noisy public park with pigeons flying around, people shouting, and sirens wailing in the background.
Oh, the stress level is completely different.
Night and day. You might know all the same rules of chess, but the timer is ticking mercilessly. The environment is chaotic. Your opponent is aggressively slapping the clock. The entire nature of the game has fundamentally changed from an intellectual exercise into a test of reflex and nerve.
And if you're not used to that pace...
If your instincts are tuned to the quiet room, you are going to lose on time every single match.
You really will. And, the speed chess environment doesn't just vary from a quiet room. It varies wildly depending on which country's park you are playing in.
Oh, geographically, right.
Yes, the unwritten rules of engagement shift geographically, which brings us to the crucial necessity of modulating for the room. Specifically, we need to examine the profound differences in cultural rhythms between the United States and the United Kingdom.
Right, because the speed of the meeting is just the baseline metric. The actual architectural structure of how an argument is built changes entirely once you cross the Atlantic.
It's a completely different framework. In American business culture, the overwhelming expectation is that contributions will be forward-moving, highly assertive, and remarkably direct. Americans heavily favor front-loading their ideas.
Front-loading. Let's really break down the mechanics of that. What does that actually look like?
It means you state your bold conclusion first, the absolute bottom line, and then you follow it up with your supporting evidence.
So punchline first.
Spot on. If you think we should cut the marketing budget by 20%, you open your mouth and immediately say, we need to cut the marketing budget by 20%, and here are the 3 metrics that prove it. The payload is delivered instantly.
It is entirely results-oriented. You give them the headline so they know specifically what they are evaluating as they listen to the rest of your point.
Conversely, British meeting culture has a completely different architectural structure. In the UK, there's a very strong preference for contextualizing before arriving at the main point.
Setting the stage, so to speak.
Exactly. You build the foundation, you acknowledge the nuance, you bring in historical data, and only then do you reveal the conclusion. If you front-load too aggressively in London, you risk sounding arrogant or dictatorial.
Which brings Marcus to mind. We have this fascinating case study of a financial analyst originally from Brazil.
Yes, Marcus, this is a classic example.
He transferred to a high-pressure consulting firm in London, and Marcus naturally leaned on his native Portuguese conversational style. In his culture, business is deeply tied to relationship building and storytelling.
It's very narrative-driven.
Right. You do not just blurt out a demand. You set up a very thorough, lengthy context to show that you respect the complexity of the situation.
It's a comprehensive, holistic way to communicate.
It is beautiful in its own context. But in his London office, it backfired disastrously. I mean, imagine Marcus standing up to present a revised pricing strategy. He clicks to his first slide, showing a 5-year historical trend of market volatility.
Setting the foundation.
Yeah, he starts weaving a narrative about global supply chain issues and competitor pricing models. In his mind, he is building a bulletproof foundation so that when he finally reveals his new pricing model, everyone will just nod in agreement.
But the British audience is sitting there wondering, where is this going? What is the actual action item?
Worse than that, his British colleagues would constantly interrupt him. They would jump in to debate his introductory context before he could even make his actual point.
They get stuck in the weeds.
Completely. Sarah from accounting would raise her hand and say, "I'm not sure I agree with your assessment of the 2022 supply chain disruptions." Suddenly, the entire meeting is derailed into a debate about a minor historical detail, and Marcus hasn't even unveiled his actual proposal.
He never even got to the pitch.
No, he was perpetually cut off, his ideas dying on the runway because the runway was just too long.
And that structural mismatch is a career killer.
Yeah.
Marcus really had to learn to front-load his payload, even in a UK setting where context is valued. He realized his initial style was leaving too much open space for interruptions.
Too many entry points for other people to derail him.
Spot on. When he finally flipped his structure and started leading with his core idea, saying, we need to reconsider our Tier 1 pricing model immediately, and I have 3 historical data points to show you why, the room completely stopped talking over him.
They knew where he was going.
Right. They finally had the anchor they needed to understand his context.
But let me push back on this for a second. If the rules change so drastically depending on whether you are sitting in a New York boardroom, a London office, or, a tech startup in San Francisco, is there really such a thing as a universal business English?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, because are we just asking you, the listener, to be a constant cultural chameleon? Are we telling you to forever change your personality, abandon your cultural communication style, and just act like an American or a Brit depending on your zip code?
This raises a very important point, and it touches on the anxiety many non-native speakers feel regarding authenticity.
Yeah, nobody wants to feel fake.
No, absolutely not. And the goal here is absolutely not to erase your own personality or to put on a fake persona. We are talking about advanced emotional intelligence and the specific skill of reading the room.
Okay, so it's more about adaptation.
Yes. You are modulating your delivery mechanism to ensure that your core, authentic message is not lost in cultural translation.
So the substance of the idea remains entirely yours.
The substance is untouched. Think of it like adjusting the equalizer settings on a very expensive sound system. The song you are playing remains your unique song.
I love this analogy.
Well, if you're playing it in a small acoustic room, you adjust the bass and treble differently than if you were playing it in a massive outdoor stadium. You're changing how the song is broadcast so the specific audience in that specific room can actually hear the lyrics clearly and feel the intended impact.
So it's about the delivery vehicle, not the passenger.
Accurately stated. Modulating your communication style is not an act of submission. It is an act of strategic translation.
I really appreciate that framing. You are the architect of the idea, but you are choosing the specific door the audience will walk through to understand it. So let's talk about actually getting our voices heard in these chaotic environments. This leads us directly to the art of the polite but absolutely necessary interruption.
The dreaded interruption.
Dreaded is the word. For a lot of people navigating international corporate spaces, the very concept of interrupting is a massive culture shock. I mean, in many cultures around the world, remaining entirely silent while someone else is speaking is the ultimate baseline sign of professional respect.
In many hierarchical cultures, interrupting a senior manager is practically a fireable offense. It implies that what you have to say is more important than what they're saying.
Right. But in US and UK corporate environments, that respectful, patient silence is heavily penalized. It is frequently misread as passivity, a lack of understanding, or worse, complete apathy toward the project.
And that's a dangerous perception. The overarching goal in these Western meetings is not to avoid interrupting entirely. If you wait for the perfect silence, you will never speak.
You'll just be a spectator.
Undeniably. The goal is to master the highly specific architecture of a polite interruption.
Because there is an actual formula to it, isn't there? It is not just yelling over someone.
Oh, definitely not. It's a very deliberate three-step sequence. First, you acknowledge the current speaker. Second, you clearly signal that an interruption is occurring. Third, you deliver the payload of your idea swiftly and clearly.
Let's really look at the linguistic toolkit for this, because it is all about having these phrases locked and loaded in your muscle memory. You cannot be searching for the right words while the window of opportunity is closing.
No, the window closes in a fraction of a second.
Exactly. Spot on. So you might use something like, sorry to jump in here, but, or if I can just add something to that.
The core function of those phrases remains the same. But the flavor changes depending on where you are geographically. In a British setting, you lean heavily into the hedging.
Hedging, making it softer.
Yes. The culture demands a softening of the blow. You might hear a native speaker say, "I do apologize for cutting in, but I wonder whether we might consider looking at the Q3 numbers."
It sounds incredibly deferential, almost apologetic, but make no mistake. It is a firm interruption, taking control of the floor.
It's an iron fist in a velvet glove. Contrast that with the slightly more direct American approach. You know, you're in a Chicago boardroom, someone is going down the wrong path, and you need to intervene.
You don't have time for the velvet glove.
You don't. Yeah. You don't apologize for wondering if you might consider something. You say, hold on, I want to push back on that for a second. Yeah. The Q3 numbers don't support that direction.
The contrast in tone is stark, but the underlying mechanic is identical. You're claiming space. However, the most critical element of this entire interruption sequence is the pivot.
Ah, the pivot. This is so important. It's vital. You cannot simply interrupt a colleague to drastically change the subject to whatever you wanted to talk about. That is considered derailing the meeting, and native speakers will quietly, intensely resent you for it.
Because it breaks the social contract of the room.
It does. You become the person who ruins the flow.
Nobody wants to be that person. So to be welcomed into the fray, your interruption must pivot off the previous speaker's momentum. You use their energy to fuel your point.
Yes, it's conversational judo.
It is. You say, building on what Sarah just said about the timeline, or to tag on to John's point regarding the budget, this is a wildly powerful psychological tool. It proves to the room that you have been actively, intently listening.
And it flatters the person you are interrupting.
It really does. You are framing your interruption as a collaborative addition to their brilliant thought, rather than a hostile takeover of their airtime.
Amara's journey perfectly illustrates the power of the pivot. We have this brilliant HR manager from Nigeria who took a senior role at a fast-moving media company in Manchester.
Right. I remember Amara. For her entire first year at the company, she basically let the weekly strategy meetings wash completely over her. She would sit there, take meticulous notes, and only speak when the managing director explicitly addressed her by name and asked a direct question.
And how did her Manchester colleagues interpret that behavior?
Well, they perceived her as reserved, timid, and lacking genuine investment in the team's success. They thought she was just punching the clock.
Which couldn't have been further from the truth.
It was incredibly frustrating for her because she had massive structural changes she wanted to implement, but she couldn't figure out how to insert them into the aggressive banter of the room. But then she started utilizing what we call bridging phrases.
And she used a very practical trick for this.
She did. She would literally write them down on a sticky note and place it next to her laptop trackpad before every single meeting.
The physical presence of the phrases serves as a visual trigger.
It's brilliant. The next time the marketing director went on a tangent about recruitment budgets, Amara didn't wait for him to finish. She looked at her sticky note, took a breath, and said, "Just to bridge off your point about recruitment costs, I've run an analysis on our current onboarding inefficiencies."
Boom, she's in.
Suddenly, she wasn't just observing the flow of the river, she was directing the current. She transitioned from being the quiet observer to effectively steering highly contentious discussions.
Amara used language as a literal bridge. It was specifically designed to carry her ideas from the safety of her notebook right into the center of the room. She acknowledged the flow of the conversation, validated the previous speaker, and gently redirected the entire team's focus.
It is so much like merging onto a fast-moving, multi-lane highway. If you are sitting in your car on the on-ramp, you don't come to a complete stop, put the car in park, and wait for the entire highway to be completely empty of all traffic before you pull out.
Now, if you do that, you'd be sitting on a ramp until midnight.
The cars will just keep flying by, you'll never get on the road.
You have to generate your own momentum.
You have to hit the gas. You match the speed of the heavy traffic, you turn your blinker on to signal your intent, you find the slight gap between two cars, and you smoothly angle your way into the lane without causing a 10-car pileup.
You're joining the flow.
You are matching the rhythm, not demanding the flow stop entirely for your convenience.
But once you successfully verge onto that highway, once you use your bridging phrase and get into the conversation, that is merely half the battle.
Right. Now you're on the highway, but there are other drivers.
Staying in the lane when the person next to you tries to speed up and cut you off, well, holding the floor is where true advanced conversational mastery lies.
Yes. Because what happens in reality, the natural ingrained instinct for so many non-native speakers, the moment someone starts talking over them, is to immediately stop talking and yield the floor.
It's a reflex.
You politely quiet down, assuming the other person has something more urgent to say, and boom, you have been pushed right back onto the shoulder of the highway. You are back to square one.
Yielding the floor is an autonomic reflex for many. It's a deeply conditioned response to conflict, and it's one you have to consciously, deliberately unlearn if you want to survive in these meetings. You need to build a dedicated, heavily practiced repertoire of holding phrases.
Let's give you some specific tools for this. If you are in a situation where you want to be deferential, maybe you are speaking to the CEO or a highly sensitive client, you can hold your ground softly. You might say, "Bear with me just one moment. I am almost finished with this thought."
It is polite, but it is a clear boundary.
But if you need to be assertive, particularly in a highly competitive US context where ideas are treated like currency, you need stronger armor. You might say, "Let me just land this thought before we move on."
Like a great one. And in the UK.
In the UK, a highly effective and structurally polite anchor is, "If you allow me to finish my point, I will address your concern." Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the words alone are entirely insufficient. If you say, "Let me just land this thought," while whispering and looking at your shoes, you are still going to get run over.
Oh, undeniably. You'll be invisible.
It's the physical delivery, the nonverbal and paraverbal tactics that determine success. Let's break down the physiology of an interruption. When you are speaking and someone forcefully tries to interrupt you, your brain registers it as a micro-conflict.
Fight or flight kicks in.
Yes. Your instinct tells you to retreat, and vocally that translates to slowing down your cadence and dropping your volume. Do not slow down.
This is a crucial point. Slowing down your speech is the universal auditory signal that you are concluding your thought. You are basically rolling out the red carpet and inviting the interrupter to take over the broadcast.
Instead, you have to fight that instinct. When you hear them start to speak over you, you need to raise your volume slightly. Not shouting, just projecting.
Taking up more auditory space.
Right. You need to vary your vocal pitch so you sound animated and engaged, and you actually need to accelerate your delivery slightly. You are broadcasting a clear, undeniable physical and auditory signal that your turn is absolutely not over. You are claiming the acoustic space in the room.
The physical momentum of your voice is just as important as the vocabulary you select. And to back up that physical momentum, there is an ultimate hack for holding the floor, which relies heavily on human psychology. It is the verbal signpost.
The verbal signpost. How does that manipulate the room's attention? I've heard this works wonders.
It really does. It's about creating an implicit subconscious contract with the room before you even deliver your argument.
Okay, lay it out for us.
If you start your contribution by saying, "My point regarding the Q4 budget has two parts," or "There are three critical things I need to highlight here," you are doing something incredibly powerful. You are subconsciously forcing the entire room to hold their interruptions until you have delivered all the parts you promised.
You are hacking their expectation.
You are. It prevents interruptions because everyone's brain is now actively, mentally waiting for point number 2 or point number 3 to drop.
It's like leaving them hanging.
Right. If someone tries to interrupt you after point 1, the rest of the room will actually feel a sense of unresolved tension because the pattern wasn't completed. It makes you sound incredibly authoritative, highly organized, and deeply prepared without sounding the least bit aggressive or domineering.
It is brilliant because you are essentially giving the room a roadmap of your thought process. You hand them the map and they feel socially obligated to let you drive the car until you reach the final destination.
You want the resolution.
But getting the floor and successfully keeping the floor is only the setup. It is the delivery mechanism. We have to transition from simply keeping the floor to making sure your ideas actually land, resonate, and shape the room's strategic thinking.
We're moving from the mechanics of participation to the psychology of influence. And that brings us to the concept of framing.
Framing is everything. It is the difference between a masterpiece hanging in a museum and a masterpiece rolled up in a dusty attic.
That's spot on. How you position an idea, the words you use to build a border around it before you even state the actual substance, dictates how the room will cognitively evaluate it.
Give me an example of bad framing.
Let's look at weak framing. If you begin your sentence by uttering, "I think maybe we could try looking at the data differently," premisely, you are practically inviting the room to dismiss you.
You're undercutting yourself.
You have injected doubt into your own idea before it even left your mouth. It sounds weak, tentative, and unsure.
But if you utilize strong framing, you change the room's posture. If you say, "I want to propose a structural shift that could fundamentally change how we handle this data," you instantly command attention.
The difference is night and day.
People sit up straighter. You are signaling deep intellectual authority. The actual idea that follows might be the exact same in both scenarios, but the strong frame demands respect.
We could look at the experience of Jin Ho to see this in action.
Yes, Jin Ho. He is a phenomenal South Korean product manager working in the hyper-competitive tech sector in Seattle.
Which is a tough room to play.
Very tough. Jin Ho possessed these incredible game-changing ideas regarding user interface design. He saw inefficiencies that no one else saw. But during the product review meetings, he would present his findings like they were just casual, floating suggestions. He would say things like, "Perhaps it might be useful if we maybe move this button."
He was utilizing language that detached him from any real conviction. He was trying to be polite and non-confrontational, which was aligned with his cultural background.
But the Seattle tech team didn't interpret it as polite. They interpreted it as a lack of confidence in his own data. The team would nod politely, say, "Interesting thought, Jin Ho," and then totally ignore his suggestion and move on to the next agenda item.
Because the frame was weak.
His ideas were brilliant, undeniably brilliant, but they were not landing. He was failing to influence the product. He had to completely evolve his delivery.
He had to learn to build an architectural frame around his expertise.
Once he started framing his ideas as reasoned, structured arguments, saying, "The current UI is causing a 12% drop-off in user engagement. I am proposing a specific redesign that will recapture that loss metric, and here's how it works," the dynamic flipped instantly.
It's an undeniable claim.
The team stopped nodding politely and started taking immediate, frantic notes. They started assigning action items based on his ideas. The core ideas themselves never changed. The packaging changed everything.
Jin Ho shifted from offering suggestions to making authoritative claims. Another highly advanced tool for building that frame, especially in UK culture where overt aggression is frowned upon, is the art of concession.
The art of concession, admitting the other side has a point.
Yes. Acknowledging a counterpoint before delivering your own argument builds immense, almost unshakable credibility. You might say to a colleague, "I take your point entirely regarding the timeline constraints, and I'd still argue that rushing the QA process will cost us more in the long run."
I have to ask, though, doesn't conceding a point inherently weaken your argument? If I am in a heated debate about a project direction, and I openly admit that the other person is right about something, aren't I just giving them ammunition?
It seems like that, doesn't it?
It does. Aren't I undermining my own stance and making myself look less convicted?
It feels like you are handing over your sword, but it is actually a highly sophisticated psychological judo move. It does the exact opposite of weakening your argument. When you gracefully concede a valid point, you demonstrate to the entire room that you are not blinded by your own ego.
So it's about showing objectivity.
You show that you have rationally surveyed the entire battlefield of the debate.
You are showing you aren't just stubbornly clinging to your idea.
Spot on. You are proving that you have actively considered all the angles, including the opposing ones. You have weighed the data, and you still hold your position. It makes your stance seem bulletproof, objective, and deeply considered, rather than just reflexively defensive. It elevates you from a debater to a strategist.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You are essentially telling the room, I see your point, I acknowledge it as a valid concern, I have factored it into my calculations, and my point is still undeniably the winning strategy. It is a massive power move disguised as politeness.
It really is.
Now, I want us to dive into the specific vocabulary that makes all of this conversational maneuvering possible. We have curated an advanced toolkit of high-impact words that instantly elevate a professional's perceived competence. Let's really drill down into these.
And remember, vocabulary at this executive level is not about memorizing a dictionary or trying to sound like a 19th century novelist. It is about deploying specific words as functional tools to manipulate power dynamics and protect your professional standing.
Tools, not decorations.
Right. Let's start with the word articulate. It is a corporate powerhouse.
I hear this word constantly in performance reviews and board meetings.
As a verb, to articulate means to express a complex idea clearly, concisely, and effectively without alienating the room. You don't just say a plan, you articulate a strategy.
It carries so much weight.
As an adjective, calling someone highly articulate is one of the highest professional compliments you can bestow in both American and British corporate environments. It means they master the flow of information. If you refer to a junior colleague's presentation by saying, Sarah articulated the core risks beautifully, you are not just praising Sarah, you are positioning yourself as a senior evaluator of talent.
Then we have composure and being unflappable. These are so critically important when the temperature in the room inevitably rises. Composure is the ability to remain completely, totally calm under intense cross-examination or during a heated emotional exchange.
When everyone else is panicking, the person with composure controls the room.
And the British business culture absolutely loves the word unflappable. I mean, if a major project is burning down around you, deadlines are missed, the client is screaming, and you are calmly sorting out the solution without breaking a sweat or raising your voice, you are unflappable.
It's the ultimate compliment over there.
It is a highly sought-after trait. Everyone wants an unflappable leader in a crisis.
Another vital concept to master is the verb to hedge. This is the strategic, calculated softening of a statement to avoid total, absolute commitment.
Because things always change.
Always. In high-level business, you rarely have 100% certainty about anything. Markets change, supply chains break, clients pivot. So you never say, this campaign will generate $2 million. You say, current models suggest this campaign has the potential to approach the $2 million mark. You hedge a forecast or you hedge a prediction.
It is a linguistic shield. It protects you from extreme blowback if the situation changes drastically, and it makes you sound highly seasoned and professional rather than naive and overly optimistic.
Exactly. You want to sound like a veteran.
Then we have verbs that are absolutely essential for navigating corporate politics smoothly: contentious, flag, and pushback.
These are the verbs of corporate diplomacy.
Let's look at how they function. A contentious issue is one that you know is going to cause an argument. But instead of saying, this is going to make everyone mad, you say, I know the budget allocation is a contentious topic. It acknowledges the emotional heat while keeping the tone clinical.
Brilliant word. And to flag something is a brilliant political tool. It means to draw attention to a potential problem before it explodes.
Sort of covering your bases.
Yes. I just want to flag that the design team is currently understaffed for this sprint. By flagging it, you remove your own liability. If the sprint fails, you warned them.
And to push back is to professionally resist an idea, a demand, or an unrealistic timeline without just saying a flat, aggressive, bridge-burning no. You don't say, I won't do that. You say, I need to push back on that timeline. It compromises our quality assurance. It frames your resistance as a protective measure for the project, not personal defiance.
These words are essential gear. But we have to address a massive, highly dangerous linguistic trap waiting for anyone crossing the Atlantic with their corporate vocabulary.
Oh, the trap. I'm talking about the phrase, to table something. This phrase has caused more international corporate confusion than almost any other idiom.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
Imagine you are in a tense boardroom in New York. You are arguing over a marketing direction, and the American boss suddenly puts his hands up and says, look, We are going in circles. Let's table this.
Now, in the United States, to table an item means to set it aside. You are taking it off the active agenda to deal with it at a later date, perhaps indefinitely. The discussion is over.
But imagine you are a British executive sitting in that New York room. If you hear, let's table this, your brain interprets it in the exact opposite way.
Okay.
Because in a boardroom in London, if a manager says, let's table this issue, they mean to bring it forward. They mean to put it on the center of the table for immediate, urgent, prioritized discussion.
The transatlantic trap. The American thinks the conversation is over and packs up their laptop.
And the Brit thinks the most important conversation of the day is just beginning and leans in. It has derailed countless international meetings and caused deep resentment simply because the same phrase operates in entirely opposing directions depending on the cultural context.
You really have to know your audience.
So what does this all mean? It means that utilizing these advanced words, hedging, flagging, pivoting, it is not about showing off that you swallowed a thesaurus before the meeting. It is about signaling to the native speakers in the room that you deeply, inherently understand the subtle, complex nuances of their specific corporate environment. You are proving that you speak their unwritten language of power and diplomacy.
It is about signaling belonging and competence. And that brings us to the most crucial final phase of our deep dive, bridging the gap between all this theoretical knowledge we have discussed and your real-world daily application.
Right, taking it off the page and into the real world.
I want to reassure you that possessing language confidence under intense pressure is not an innate, magical personality trait that you are simply born with. It is a mechanical, learned skill.
It is a muscle that can be trained.
The gap between sitting silently, completely paralyzed on the Zoom call, and confidently commanding the boardroom is highly bridgeable if you use the right exercises.
We need actionable steps. You cannot just listen to us dissect this for an hour and then magically transform into a commanding orator tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. You have to practice in low-stakes environments to build the neurological pathways. One of my favorite, most effective methods is the psychological anchor.
The physical notepad technique. I love this one.
Yes. Before your next team meeting, do not just open your laptop. Literally take a physical notepad and a pen. Write down 2 or 3 entry phrases in large letters, right? Building on that. Or if I could jump in for a second. Having those specific words physically sitting in front of you, taking up space in the real world, serves as a psychological anchor.
It bypasses that amygdala freeze response.
When the meeting gets chaotic, your brain doesn't have to search a massive database for the right words. It just reads the script in front of you. It gives your brain localized permission to use them.
It externalizes the cognitive load.
I also highly recommend practicing mock scenarios out loud at home. This sounds silly, but it undeniably works. Stand in your living room, imagine the colleague who always interrupts you, and practice raising your volume, changing your pitch, and saying, let me just land this thought.
We have to build the muscle memory.
You have to physically feel the change in your vocal authority echoing in the room. You have to train your vocal cords to project when your instinct is to retreat.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the key to this transformation is systematic, measured growth. Do not go into your next meeting and try to implement all of these strategies simultaneously.
Yeah.
You will overwhelm your nervous system and likely shut down entirely. Layer the skills progressively over time.
Break it down into wins.
Week 1, your only goal, your sole metric for success, is to successfully use an entry phrase to get into the room. Just merge onto the highway once. Week 2, you focus purely on the nonverbal tactics of holding the floor when someone speaks over you. Don't drop your volume. Week 3, you practice framing your ideas with authority instead of weak suggestions.
And keep the cultural overlay in mind at all times. If you are operating in the U.S., remember that an imperfectly phrased idea delivered with high conviction and strong volume will almost always win over a grammatically perfect idea delivered tentatively. They respect the conviction. If you are operating in the UK, pairing your newfound confidence with collaborative, hedging phrases and well-timed concessions will build immense goodwill and unshakable credibility with your team.
You are adapting the toolkit to the terrain.
This has been an incredible journey through the hidden layers of corporate communication. To quickly summarize our deep dive, you now hold the tactical cheat codes to the unwritten, invisible social etiquette of English business meetings. You understand the turn-taking tango. You know how to politely but firmly merge onto the conversational highway. You know the physiological tricks to hold your lane when challenged. And you know how to architecturally package your ideas so they carry the weight, respect, and authority they rightfully deserve.
I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. Consider for a moment the sheer scale of human progress, the brilliant corporate strategies, the groundbreaking creative innovations, and the life-saving solutions that have been permanently lost to the void.
Oh, wow.
Lost simply because a brilliant, capable mind sat in a meeting, silently waiting for a polite pause in the conversation that never came. The world is deprived of genius every day due to a lack of turn-taking skills. Your voice, your specific expertise, and your unique insights matter entirely too much to let the moment pass you by ever again.
That is incredibly powerful. The world needs your ideas, and now you have the tools to make sure they are heard. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of professional communication. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
It has been a profound pleasure unraveling these complexities and building this toolkit with you. Until next time, take these strategies, step into your next meeting, and start claiming your rightful space in the room.
We will see you on the next one.